All right, here we go. Today's live intro for our episode with Frank Shamrock, who is a UFC legend. He's actually called Frank the Legend Shamrock. And Frank grew up in a tough way and ultimately found himself behind bars as a young man and had a chance, one last chance, with Bob Shamrock came knocking and said, hey, no nonsense, follow the rules, and we'll fight through this thing. And a legend was born in that moment. Frank went out and he and his brother Ken took on the world of the UFC and helped build it and help normalize it. And Frank was one of the early champions, but also, more importantly, the mouthpiece that made it okay for the UFC to exist and mixed martial arts to exist. And he's one of the absolute plank holders. So yesterday we had Don Fry, who's an out-and-out plank holding Hall of Fame level fighter. And then today we have Frank Shamrock, who's an out-and-out plank holding founder of the UFC fight world. What does he do now? He's an entrepreneur. He makes documentary movies. He's a speaker. He's a consultant. And he's just a wonderful guy who's at peace with his decision to not fight anymore and to focus on business. And I know you're just going to love who Frank is. Now, producing this episode, I guess we have to give a production credit to John Preston, the 22&U singer, Marine, long walker. If you don't know about John Preston, look in the Break It Down show guest link. You will find his episode there where he talks about his powerful story of veteran suicide and how it impacted his family and nearly killed him. Also, of course, hosting with me and the full executive producer credit is Scott Huesing, who's my dear friend, and it's always fun to go talk to people. We got this episode right. Like, this is the last episode we did face to face. We drove back from the Valley all the way down to Orange County in about 35 minutes. That's how empty California was as everything was shutting down for the COVID thing. So you're going to enjoy this episode with Frank. It's really good. I'm trying to look at my other notes here. Go to frankshamrock.com. You can tweet at him. He's a really receptive guy. And I know you're going to dig who he is. Hey, a couple things about us. So the Break It Down show, sometimes we have UFC Fighting Legends on the show. Sometimes we have Taylor Dane, who we just recorded with Taylor Dane. Oh, my God. We've had so many musical legends, so many fighting legends, Hall of Famers, world champions, so many incredible, incredible episodes. And so if you're into that kind of thing, we're always looking for new guests. We're always looking to ways to take an hour and give everybody back an experience. I know you're going to love that. You know, of course, the thing I always close on is our powerful charitable charter here at the Break It Down show. John, Scott, and I all contribute monthly to Save the Brave, and also with our own time too. So Save the Brave, savethebrave.org, and you're gonna help us help people have PTSD. But for right now, let's get it on. Let's get Frank Shamrock in the ring with us.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Frank Shamrock, and you're listening to The Break It Down show.
Yes, we are.
This weekend, I've interviewed, let's see, a Navy SEAL who was a SEAL Team 6 guy, so top of the pyramid there. Jay Dobbins, who's an
I don't know about
ATF.
the top of the pyramid, all right? You got Marines.
In the SEAL world. He's in the SEAL.
In the Navy
Close.
world.
Yes.
Okay.
I know. To the Marines, he's like, question.
Greg, I love you, brother. Come on.
Jay Dobbins, who is an undercover Hell's Angel infiltrating ATF agent who's been shot at point blank range in the chest. Don Fry.
Wait,
yeah.
I'm assuming he's still alive.
Still alive.
Okay.
I have had dead people on the show.
I was going to say.
He's not one of them.
He was a silent guest.
Yes. Don Fry. We just had an infantry.
Boring interview.
Yeah, exactly. UFC legend and, Predator. You're the legend. He's the Predator. Don Fry, who's a Hall of Famer in his own right. And then, of course, we just had an infantry officer. And so far, the infantry officer is like the weak link in this thing. And like, it's crazy, man. You guys are it's a high caliber right now, Scott.
Yeah, it's up there. And we know each other through John Preston, another Marine. And that's how we got linked up. I think sometimes people listen to the show and they're like, how do these guys know all these fucking people? Sometimes we say that and we're like, Frank, how the fuck did we meet again? And they're like, oh, John, yeah. I think Pete and I were driving up. He goes, how do we know Frank again?
I did.
John Preston. Because John's been on the show.
Yeah.
Pete and I were both out hiking with John, and that's how it came to be. So Frank the Legend Shamrock. So for those like me who don't know every nth detail of the sport of UFC, MMA, all the variations of what you do, I mean, just tell everybody, get up to speed, like you've got a storied family background, how you got into the sport, how long you've been in it real quick. And then I think we'll probably just shift gears and talk about, whatever we feel like.
Sure. I started in 1994, so just after the sport had started, which is about 93. My brother, Ken Shamrock, got me into the sport, and I started my career in Japan. Had a very successful career in Japan, ended up winning King of Pancrase title over there. As the UFC grew here in the United States, I moved my career over here. I was the first ever middleweight champion in the UFC. So my era was beginning in 1997, right as we were fighting legislation and legalization and sort of getting back on cable because we were kicked off of cable. And so my job was I was the first talent spokesman for the UFC. So I was actually hired to go around, talk to all the cable company carriers, find out how we were able to get back on cable through distribution. So that was my second job besides fighting. And then eventually the middleweight class turned to the 185. We got 5 different weight classes. And so I was a very early pioneer in the sport. I am now basically known as the guy that convinced America that cage fighting was a good idea, which that's still probably out there. But I had great success in fighting. I won the UFC title defended it 4 times, and then I won the WEC championship, and I won Strikeforce championship, which was a league that I was also an owner in. And we took that all the way to CBS, primetime television. And then eventually the UFC bought it and everything else and paid for me to retire. And so I've been retired since. And
You're
now I work
retired.
as
you can't say the R word with a straight face.
I'm totally retired. Like my days revolve around, I wonder what my daughter's doing today. And can I get home in time to pick her up from school and how late lunch is going to go. But I did spend about 8 years doing nothing, just healing up my body and hiking. And I still kept my broadcast career alive and my brand alive. But I didn't go to work for about 8 years, which was wonderful. And then about 2 years ago, I launched a speaking career. So now I do quite a bit of speaking, coaching for large corporations and corporate events, leadership sales. And I have a slew of celebrity clients that I also use my management techniques on to sort of help them with their branding and creating brands and products for them. And that's kind of what
it's another underachiever.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Sitting around eating bonbon wrappers all over the place.
Just doing a bunch of nothing.
Out of shape. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, my retirement was... I just stopped going into the gyms. Like that was my thing because I spent 16 years as a professional.
When you're ripped away too, and you're hyper focused and on fighting and training and everything, and you are pulled away from your family. And Pete and I can understand that from a military perspective. Now that you are in this space, how do you look back and how important is that to you to be connected and be able to spend time with your kids and your family? How much more appreciative are you now?
So much so. And I'm super blessed to have kids that are 20 years apart. So my son was born when I was about 16, and I was pursuing a career of professional athletics. So, I was the weekend dad, I was the part-time dad, and I missed a huge part of his growing up. And so when my daughter was born, I was at a time when I could retire. I was getting old. And I wanted to stay out with her. So it's been the last, she's 11 now. So the last 10 years have just been extraordinary because, unlike most dads, I don't have to get up and go to work in the morning. I get up and I take her to school. And then my day starts with her being at school and then school ending, at which point I pick her up. And so just as a human experience, and I wish every dad could do this, especially with a daughter, it's been probably the greatest human experience I've had in my life is to be there at all times, to be really a present and guiding father. And I do all my business surrounding her schedule. So, they offered me to run Bellator. It's $1 million a year. I was like, nah, I'm good. I got this whole thing with my daughter. I'm raising her. And, they thought I was crazy, but it is the most important thing in my life right now. And now I see, the value of it in her life. And then also, how I wasn't present in my son's life and the result, which has been, he grew up with a part-time dad.
It's a
remarkable transformation and path. I mean, you're not quite 50 years old, but basically you're going to be there soon.
Getting close.
Yeah. As you reflect.
I'm inches away.
Yeah. I mean, you got a few minutes, but not that many minutes, and they go by fast. So you're smart to take time and slow down with your daughter. But as you look back at your improbable path, and we all of us, are improbable in the fact that we're here. But when you look back, your family upbringing, being adopted into a family, turning into combat, like you're not supposed to be in this good a shape. You're not supposed to get $1 million a year, job offers. A guy like you was supposed to, not be here. What do you think? Like, what are your thoughts on how you got here?
Well, I mean, it means a lot because like we were talking about earlier, I never thought I'd make it this far. I mean, the goal was set low. I was like, if I make it to 18, this will be amazing. Like, this will be fun because I'll be an adult. This will be fantastic. But I actually turned 18 when I was in prison.
Right.
And so for me, like, I left home when I was 11. So getting to 18 was a big deal. Getting to 21 was a big deal. Getting out of prison at 21 was a big deal. So, and then even the fighting thing. I mean, I was not a fighter. I'm very much not into the physical violence. I like sports. I like competition. But I didn't like the fighting. It didn't appeal to me because I grew up in a home of abuse. So to me, it's like, you don't need to hurt people and you probably shouldn't hurt people. So it was a big learning curve for me to sort of figure out how I could make it okay to hurt people. I got really good at it. But yeah, I mean, to me, that's why, I feel blessed every single day. I wake up every day and go right into prayer and meditation because it's like every day for me is a tremendous blessing. I mean, I got out of Folsom Prison in 1994. And 2 days later, I was at the martial arts school.
Yeah.
And it's like my life has been, completely changed from that point on. And, I'm dedicated. That's why I do so much charity work. That's why I do so much social work. People stopped along the journey, my journey, and helped me out. They were like, hey, he's a smart kid. Here's a funny kid, an active kid. Like, let's help him out because I didn't have the resources. So for me now in my life, besides doing that for my own family, I try to do that for as many people as possible, as many youth as possible, because someone did that for me. Like just total stranger stopped and was like, wow, this kid needs help, and totally helped me out. And that in and of itself has changed my life. Total strangers.
I think that's something you gain with age. You get that wisdom along the way. I don't know if there's really a number you can set on it. Like, yeah, past 40, most people figure this shit out. I mean, I guess there's plenty of people that haven't figured that out. There's people still working in their 50s and 60s at these corporations or factories. They can't imagine being retired. I'm doing air quotes at age 39, or even for guys in the military that do 20 years. You join at 19, you could retire at 39 and do something completely different, and then shift that gear and really be in a space where you're setting your own schedule, you're making yourself happy. I want, before we talk about the charity stuff though too, I kind of wanted to go back to something you're talking about. Like you said, you didn't like the fighting. Most people that are watching, the public on the TV or at the sports bar, and they're watching these guys tear each other apart and pin them to the mat and do roundhouse kicks and arm bars. They think like they must love this. They must get up every morning and just breathe this air. How do you, for guys that, especially in the military, it's an easy analogy to make, that use the training and then have to go into combat and see some of the worst things of humanity. I think that the training and that muscle memory kicks in. Is it the same way for you every time you step inside that ring?
Yeah.
And for most guys?
Yeah, you just get used to it, and then it becomes commonplace, like anything. But it took me a long time to get used to it and then have the desire to hurt people, because I was really hurting people. I mean, I became really good. I was studying at all times, and, I was breaking people's arms and legs and necks, and, I was really hurting people. But there was a big, psychological hump to get over from being a child of abuse and, living in a very unsafe environment, to living on the streets, to being in jails and prisons, to then purposely trying to hurt people.
Did that trauma, I know it affects everybody differently, especially as a young person. Do you think that trauma fueled what you were doing in the ring?
Well, the emotions of it were fuel for me.
Yeah.
Because it was actually this is why I tell everyone, get into martial arts. If you got angst, if you got emotional issues. I had emotional issues because of things that happened to me. And so, it's rare that you can find a profession where you can work through those issues, where each day you can come home completely exhausted and have literally given everything to your craft. And the process of that, there's no emotions left. Like, you're done. You fall into bed.
So how many fights have you had? How many fights have you had?
I had
Roughly.
44 professional
for every
fights.
fight, you're training probably
1,000 hours.
1,000
Like,
hours,
it's insane.
45,000 hours of training.
So it's insane.
And you get through all that.
Yeah.
Is the tank empty now?
Yeah. Well, what happened for me is, I never really wanted to fight. I wanted to be, this is so odd, is, when I was 8 years old, I watched boxing for the first time, and I saw, this person, go through this personal journey and this physical accomplishment. And then, he was applauded, and he was, awarded, and he, had the microphone, and he had a message, and it was important and powerful. And so there was all this storytelling. So I knew at an early age that that's what I wanted to do. But I never took boxing. The sport didn't exist. So it was really a matter of, I had this burning desire to accomplish this thing, which was, leadership and being a champion. But the resources had never been there, and I had never applied myself. And it wasn't until I was in prison, I had nothing going on. And I had a mentor, Bob Shamrock, and he's like, listen, man, if you keep building your body and if you keep doing this thing, at some point your desire will meet reality. The sport didn't exist, mind you, back then. It wasn't even on the planet.
Yeah.
But it just happened to be when I got out of prison, I'd built my body up, I'd built my mind up, I'd built up all this desire, and then the sport existed. And so it was a chance for me to say, yes, I'll do it. But, saying yes, showing up, competing is vastly different than having the killer instinct and being like, well, I'm just going to break his arm, because that didn't exist in me. I would fight for my survival. I would fight for, my friend if someone was being hurt. But I had never purposely been like, I'm going to beat this guy up because that's my job and that's what I get paid to do. So that just was a big psychological hurdle for me. And like you were talking about in the experience factor, I overcame that through experience. I fought my first no rules fight and I lost. I got my ass kicked for 30 minutes because I got his arm. I should have broke it, and I didn't. I was like, oh, he'll give up. And he was in the other world, which is break my arm. I don't give a shit. It's like, I will kill you. So we were in two separate worlds. And I had to jump across, I had to make that crossing. And for me, it was having the experience. I lost $10,000. I lost this trajectory in my career. I lost, respect. I lost, all the stuff that I was building for myself as a bridge to being successful. And I realized that, I had to do it. I had to break the arm. And so I trained my mind that was okay.
There's a lot of plank owners that we know that started the sport, and you look at it now, I can sense the pressure, not only losing the fight, and the respect, I think, is important, because the field's gotten a lot bigger. There's a lot more fights. They're more frequent. Do you think it's tougher for those young guys now, that amount of pressure? And then, you lose one fight, it's like getting a D on your report card when you're trying to get A's. Like, you never come back for that. How much different is it from when you were growing up in the sport, 20 years ago, to what it has become now with these young, they want to be the Frank Shamrocks?
Yeah, it's a lot harder now, just because there's only so many slots. And there's really only one guy on top or two guys on top. So, where it used to be 1 in 10,000, now it's 1 in 10 million.
Wow.
And so those are the numbers. And
There's
one,
some odds.
as you said, you lose one fight and you go to the back of the line and you lose half of your pay. And what really woke me up was, I could deal with all the other stuff. I lost half my pay. So I went from, I'm going to win $20,000 to I won $10,000. And it changed my life, because I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing? If I'm going to be in there, swinging swords, I got to be ready to chop somebody down. And it was through, self-diagnosis and realizing, like, I had an emotional issue that was tied to being abused. And so I had to overcome that. And that was a personal journey for me that I went on. And I accomplished that journey by consuming violence. So I've retrained my brain. I was like, well, this is perfectly fine.
I can do this. Yeah.
And get paid for it.
And I think we all know this, like, going in, but the actual application and the actual jumping of that bridge, to get to that point where you can make these steps, because we've had Tony the Tiger Lopez on. He's been multi-time world champion, 2 different times fighter of the year. You don't get there on skill and tenacity. You get there on making that jump, whatever it is to get you over that point. Because the person you're looking across from, is there to do the same thing. Whether it's, I was talking to Don, and I'm like, what if like someone like Alexei Karelin is staring back at you, a guy that throws 300-pound men in their head for a living, and you're gonna try to. And back in your era, as hard as it is now to break through, you think about back then, it wasn't film. Like you might have never seen this person, never even heard of this style, or however they changed it to their own thing. And also, there's no way you could look around at the arenas that you're in and go, "Oh yeah, this is going to continue to happen for the next 20 years." Like you get kicked off of TV, you have to go to Puerto Rico to fight, and all these other places where they'll let you do it. How do you process and make not only the business jump to go, yeah, this is viable, this is worth my time, but also, yeah, how do you actually make that tactical jump to get over your emotions? I mean, Joe Frazier would fight in his head, before Thrilla Manila. And in some scenarios, he loses. And he's like, I am prepared to die. And he actually meant it. And basically damn near did die in the ring.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the real difference. And the guys you see rise to the top are the ones that are like, oh, I'm ready to die. Yeah. They're just like, they're all in. And that's the psychological, edge. And that's the final, leap. And that's where I got to. I was like, first of all, I had a firm belief that nobody could probably kill me because I'd been through all these things, both as a youth and, prison. I'd been through all these personal experiences, and then I became a fighter. And then, at the beginning, I was just a punching bag because I didn't know anything. So I was the guy they beat up to warm up. I was literally like, come on, Frank. And I'd be like, because I didn't know anything. So I was perfect. I couldn't hurt anybody. I couldn't do anything. Yeah. So I was a perfect punching bag. And so I literally grew up,
Do you get paid for that too?
No, you just get beat up and then you clean
like a fucking rodeo clown.
Yeah, it was
I think those guys actually get more money than like fucking cowboys. But yeah,
but it developed this psyche where I was like, hey, wait a minute, nobody can kill me, and then I had to make the barrier. Well, then I should be ready to there's nothing that can stop me then. You know what I mean? Because I started to realize if John Lober can beat me up for 30 minutes and he couldn't kill me, then I was like, wait a minute, nobody can kill me. And so I developed what a lot of people come into this as that have a lot of confidence and have a lot of personal self-worth and have a lot of belief in themselves, which is nobody can beat me. I'm unstoppable. And so once I developed that mindset, then, I instantly crossed over that sort of chasm. And then I had to retrain my brain, which is, hey, it's okay to break someone's arm, leg, neck. That's just fine. And then I started using that position of psychology to my advantage, which is I could spot, psychological weakness and I could spot fear and I could spot self-doubt because I knew what it was. I grew up surviving on the streets. So I could tell when the line was fake. I could tell when you weren't really in it. And I would just lean into it, and that's why I picked on people. That's why Phil Baroni got teased so badly because I knew, psychologically he didn't believe. He thought and he wanted like I used to, but he didn't believe and he didn't know how to take that misbelief and make it real. He just, I'll keep showing up. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep showing up. And so I could manipulate those people quite easily.
Was he a better fighter than you?
No.
Right.
No. That's why he didn't believe. And he knew that.
Yeah. Because you're right. He's one of those guys where he could always get on the card, always make money, but he never really could reliably break through.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Phil, but
no.
It's just how these things sort themselves out.
Yeah. And he did, but he didn't have the technical ability.
Right.
And then he also wasn't willing to go get the technical ability.
Right.
And so that was the difference. I was the first guy to raise my hand. What? I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? And they'd beat me up and then they'd show me. I'd be like, okay, write it down. But it takes a really focused mind to take the beatings, take the lesson, learn from it, and then come back again. Because most people leave at the beating, or they leave before the lesson sets in, and they don't come back.
Who do you get the teachings from when you're all starting the sport, and there's so much scrutiny on what you're doing? Is it just learn as you go, and the cream rises to the top, and then you guys just beat the shit out of each other?
Well, it's partly that, and then the truth is, fighting is actually really simple. Because the human body hasn't changed in hundreds of thousands of years. This is the same structure. So we've been doing this forever. We're just finally learning more about biomechanics and health and all these other things, but nothing has changed. So the truth is, everybody has knowledge. everybody knows something about how their body works or other bodies work or have been in situations where things have worked. And the hardest part is to stay a student and stay open to this knowledge, because everyone can teach you something. But the minute I become a champion, I stop listening to everybody else because I know everything. And so the reason why I was so successful is, first, I didn't know anything. So I was an eager student. I wrote everything down. I'd ask all the questions. This is an era when you didn't ask questions. So this is the old martial arts. Yeah. You don't ask questions or you get beat. And then they teach you something. And so I would take the beatings because I needed to have the information. And then the hardest part for me was the second phase, which was once I became knowledgeable and ready to fight, the hardest part was everybody at that time was a singular martial arts person. And so they always wanted their martial art to be the most important. And they wanted their way to be the most important. So I would have to take the information and decipher what was most important for me and was most necessary for my body and my system and my structure, and filter through the ego and the fear and all the other stuff that was attached to, well, my martial art's the best, so let me show you. Yeah. Because that's how the world works. It's people grab onto something, they're a master, they want to teach you their mastery. So, the reason why I was so successful is I remained a student and I remained, a nerd. I wrote everything down. I get volumes of diagrams of the human body and mechanics and, like, why would this work? And explain this mechanic to me. And I was the guy to be like, excuse me, sir. Can you explain the biomechanics of the side kick? And they'd be like, come here and I'll kick you.
Yeah, before you choke me, explain.
Stay right there. I'll be
But
right
I
over.
also realized if someone couldn't explain it to me, they didn't really know why they were doing it.
Yeah.
They were just doing it because someone taught them to do it. So there's very few people that could be like, well, let me explain this, how it works with the human body.
Absolutely a hallmark of those that distinguish themselves from good to great, I think, in my experience. And you take any sport or any profession for that matter. We applied it in the military from a leadership perspective. Tiger Woods, golf, he still has a coach. Still always learning the top of his game and has had lulls. But I think that is probably something maybe our generation, that the Gen Xers, we could pride ourselves on, is we're really, we use that as a talking point, as being students of the trade, being students of your craft, and always being a lifelong learner. I've said it probably 1,000 times, if not more. That's what makes me happy, is continue to learn from guys above me and below me. So I'm never motherfucking or throwing the young guys under the bus, because the moment you do, they're coming up with a new way that no one's ever seen it, or showing you something that worked before. So it's wisdom.
Yeah, and I came up with this system early on, which is the plus equals minus. And if you find any knowledge that you're looking for, and you find someone who's your plus, who has the knowledge, you can learn it from them. If you find your minus, which is the person who has no knowledge, like me, you can teach them. In the teaching, you'll learn better. In the teaching, you'll refine, and they'll learn better. And then you search for your equal, and you compete against them. It's like you can do that in anything: marriage, fighting, car mechanics. Like it doesn't really matter, because it's just knowledge, and it's the transfer of knowledge. And the hardest part is you get wrapped into these roles. When everybody in the world is patting you on the back and telling you're the greatest fighter in the world, it's hard to then be like, oh, can you show me that one more time? High school student, can you show me that one more time? But there are people learning just like I am who have different perspectives, who have different knowledge. And that was the hardest part is, I'd have a boxing coach and I'd have to tell him, no, don't teach me boxing. Teach me boxing for my body with these rule sets in this mindset. And they'd be like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, I need you to think about that. Yeah. Because I don't need to bomb and weave and dip and do all these things that would make great boxing. I just need to be able to box inside of my box and with these rules and inside of this parameter. And so I would go through countless coaches, because some people would refuse to, well, I'm not going to teach you that. And I'd be like, okay, well, then you're not the teacher I need. And so it was, became a process for me. And then when I found those teachers, my wrestling coach was my wrestling coach for over 20 years. Because I'd be like, no, here's what I'm good at, and here's what I like. And he'd be like, okay. And he would teach me the stuff that was for me, not about wrestling. So he was able to move aside wrestling. And that was because he had an education in judo before he had an education in wrestling. So he understood a different dynamic of grappling art. And for him, it was like totally commonplace for someone to be like, oh, no, I'm more of a judo wrestler than I am a wrestler. So it was easy for his brain. And then he cared. He really cared about me and my journey. So he was able to put aside his needs.
That's pretty tough finding the right coach or the
Hardest
right
thing
advisor or the right agent.
Right mentor,
Because those, just like any relationship, friendship, that chemistry really has to be there. I think is how hard is it, especially with more fighters out there, the more guys saying, I can teach you this, and they're willing to teach them anything, and it's just they're peddling shit.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of that in the sport now?
There's a lot of that in all martial arts, and I'm sure in all sports. Because, if you look at high school wrestling, it's usually some dad who wrestled in high school who, didn't do all that well, and now he's a high school wrestling coach because that's what he likes to do, is to keep the wrestling going. So it's just hard to find the information. But, when you remain a student and when you keep looking for those mentors and you kind of keep your goal in mind, then those guys show up. Right. That's what happened for me. Those guys show up. Because they're also looking to share their knowledge, and they're also looking to expand their, mindset and stay involved with the thing they love.
So I want to ask, along the way, there has to come a point, maybe it was that first fight where you lost 10K because you got your ass kicked. And there's somewhere along the career you say, I got to not only be a student of this trade, but I got to turn my hat around and learn business and marketing to become the Deion Sanders of mixed martial arts. And UFC. Did that happen for you? Was there a moment where you said, you know what? Again, good to great. The great guys are also doing this, and they're saving money. They're diversifying. They've got 5 different types of revenue generating streams. When was that point for you?
That for me was in 1999.
Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakingthatshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
That for me was in 1999. That's when I got my first Hollywood agent lawyer guy. And Henry Holmes, still my manager, agent, lawyer guy. And I sat down. He was a big-time entertainment lawyer. And, all the greats were lawyered by him.
Yeah.
He did the George Foreman grill. Like, he was just a monster, just wonderful, and a wonderful human being. I sat down and told him my story. Here's what I want to do. Here's my game plan. Here's the thing. I'm going to retire from fighting. I'm going to move to Hollywood. I'm going to become an actor. He's like, great. You're going to need to control your brand. You're going to need this. You're going to need that. And so he was able to, lay out goals or parameters that were necessary for me to accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish. That's why when I fight Tito Ortiz in 1999, I hand the belt back and I retire. Because we put a clause in the contract. If I ever publicly retired or renounced my championship, the rest of the contract was null and void. That's how I became a free agent. So I was able to take control of my brand and take control of my career at that time. And then I was able to do whatever I wanted to, monetize how I wanted to, take ownership in leagues. I didn't make my money from fighting. I made my money from owning leagues and taking equity in different companies that couldn't afford my services.
It's like Diamond Dallas Page made all his money, not in wrestling, but in yoga.
Yeah, and merchandising.
Yeah.
But it's the thing is if business evolves, and, Henry taught me this early. It's like, you're selling a limited resource, and at some point the resource will run out.
Yeah.
And if you don't have other opportunities or other things lined up, you're just out of resources.
Yeah.
And he's like, then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So everything for me was building to a certain stage of my value so that I could branch off into these other areas, filmmaking and acting and, spokesman and all these different roles that I had envisioned for myself.
And the speaking too, I think when you transition into that, I like to ask this because what's the most diverse audience you've gone and spoken in front of that you thought 20-year-old Frank would have never thought in a million years I'll be standing in front of, 1,000 people talking about this or 10 people about this?
Mine was teaching Google G-Tech team. I was flown to Hong Kong to teach the G-Tech team for Google. They were having trouble with sales and organization. It's a new team, and they were just not gelling. but on it were, 28-year executives running billions of dollars. And so they bring me, recently retired, 39-year-old knucklehead to teach them leadership. Yeah. And I'm like, what am I going to teach these guys? These are monsters of executive leadership. And what am I going to teach them that's going to allow them to work together better? And so that was a great, life experience for me. And the best part was I write this entire leadership curriculum and program for them because I thought, this is fantastic. If we start with Google, we can change the whole world. But it ended up being just a super powerful experience because we used martial arts and we used fighting as a medium to cross this threshold that they didn't really know existed. Mm-hmm. And the threshold was everybody was a monster and wasn't ready to work with each other and understand each other and communicate openly because everyone was so big and had so much. They were all masters. Mm-hmm. So we had to get all the masters to come down to the student level and try to learn how to work together. And that was and we did it through martial arts.
That's tough.
Yeah, it was
That's a challenge.
Really tough. Probably the hardest, audience I've ever had. But they were receptive and they were ready. And so it made, they went on the journey. And it made it fun actually because at the end we were all like, yeah, we're going to fights together, because they crossed this threshold. They were all fearful of not being successful because they were so successful. They were all fearful of their team not progressing. They were all fearful of not making their individual deadlines, so the entire team wouldn't make their. So everyone was just in this place of fear, even though they were so successful.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to cross that barrier together,
to
where they were like, and then we went to, so that was day one. Day two is the social celebration, right? And so we go to live traditional Muay Thai fights in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
And it's like in this mall where everyone's smoking and it's just like straight out of a movie. And people are getting elbowed and faces are popping open. And so all the stuff that they learned, communication and risk and all this different stuff, it just happened right in front of them in this amazing atmosphere. So people were just blown away. I was blown away by the experience.
One of the common themes that we seem to come up with, and I hear you talking about, is fear-based things. And in your industry, as a fighter, we all have to conquer our ego. And it sounds like you did at some point. But all of that fear, keeps the ego overinflating and getting in your business. And I always think I got to get my ego back there. It's great to have an ego, but under control so it doesn't undermine my own success or create fear and all these things. How does someone like you get through that? Because every opportunity is there for you just to inflate your ego and then just take a beating. And it's hard to learn that lesson in general, but you're in a business where ego has to be powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I realized early on that it was, it's all fake. Win, lose. Because the minute you lose, everyone's like, oh, dang. And they're turning heads and walking away.
Yeah.
Loyalties.
So I was able to kind of, see what the value of it was. And it was necessary to present that. It's necessary for me to stand up and say, I'm going to kick everybody's ass. I'm the greatest fighter in the world. I didn't believe that. That's just what I was saying, to sell tickets and to move the needle and to pick a fight.
Yeah.
The truth was I was cleaning mats right next to my students. I was teaching, children. I was, volunteering at the, juvenile halls and doing my speech and trying to get people just like I was into the position I am now. So I stayed in a position of service and I stayed servicing that minus group, the people didn't have anything. And that's what kept me humble. Chuck Norris was teaching martial arts until he was 75 because that's what kept him, remembering and down to this level of people where it's these are the people I want to be because this is who I am. So that's how it worked for me. I taught class, I taught kids, I just kept teaching and sharing what I thought was important because of what it did for me. And it enabled me to see what reality was. Because the reality is all that stuff's crap.
Yeah.
The minute I lose, they'd be like, he never was that good.
But when does that reality, because at some point, right, that reality
I don't think anybody's
flips.
bold enough to say that. But Maybe on the Twitter.
That's what they say behind. Yeah, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah.
At some point, the reality is, though, you do enter a ring with someone else with the same goal in mind and, the same fears and doubts and confidence, and you've got to look across at whoever it is, and you've now got a job to do and they do. And it's no longer time for, hey, we're both working today. We're both going to get paid. I'll see you in about 45 minutes and we'll hug. I mean, that probably will happen, but in the meantime, you have to go to a different place and be like, it's working time. Now it's time to break bones. And, and this guy across from me knows how to break bones too.
Yeah, but that comes from preparation. Just like in the military, just like in anything else.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 hours to do, 25 minutes in the ring. Right. So by that time, my mind, my body, my community, like everything has been, geared towards that moment.
Right.
And, once I made that jump, like I talked about earlier about, swinging the sword, once I realized this is my job, is to fuck people up.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm being paid to do.
Are you a 10,000 reps guy?
I'm a student. So at some point when I'm dead, it'll be perfect. But until then, it gets better.
There's never a fulcrum point.
There's never a point where I'm the best because at some point, someone with a better body, with more fluidity, with better breathing and relaxation technique, at some point somebody will study me and be like, I've got a better way. So for me, it was, I'm always studying, I'm always practicing. And then to your point on the mental preparation, I knew I was ready when I could sleep at night. And all of my dreams were that moment, top to bottom, and every time I came out victorious. So that's when I was ready. Nothing stopped between I'd fall asleep, all the training would continue.
Yeah.
And
I'd
wake up and I'd be like, all right, I'm good today. But those were also the dreams where I dreamt, like the Guinness World Record with Kevin Jackson, where I dreamt the armbar, where I dreamt the slam with Igor Zinoviev, where I woke up in the middle of a dream because I was watching myself as a third person and talking about myself to myself about this techniques because I was so connected to the moment that I was able to, remove everything and have a conversation with myself.
I don't know what that's called. Omnipotent third person.
I don't know. It's so weird. But I wake up and I'd be like, oh my God, I was just talking to myself about this. But
Sportscaster third person or something.
Yeah. Well, I think I was in between like lucid dreaming and observing my own dream. And because I was so focused on the studying, I was watching myself train and then talking to myself like, wait a minute. There's a hole right there in the styles. And this is back in the day. One of my claims to fame is I was the first complete fighter because I could, through those dreams, see the actual holes in the styles where the styles hadn't connected completely, where there was pauses or, things weren't flowing like the body is naturally supposed to flow. So there'd be giveaways, there'd be holes, there'd be,
And no drugs or mushrooms involved in any of this.
No, nothing.
No LSD involved.
No, this is just...
all natural.
Yeah.
Frank Shamrock.
Yeah. And I think because I started meditating and visualizing when I was, in prison, basically. And I would visualize these things.
Yeah.
And I would, get myself to a state of really, relaxed awareness. And then when I visualized this stuff in this awareness state, things would just be slower and easier and I could see. Plus, when you study the human body, when things don't flow with how the human body moves. This is, I think, was a huge advantage I had over most fighters. Most fighters aren't studying the biomechanics of the human body. So someone says, do this, and they go, okay, and they do it. But they're not going, does that flow with my body? Is that mechanically, efficient to what I need?
So is the meditation, is that kind of part of the pro fighter's kit bag now? Is that
it should be.
Because I've heard,
it should be.
I've heard some people do it and they have bad effects from meditation. I mean, I was just reading, not up for publication yet, but Mike Day's book. Mike's been on the show, Navy SEAL, shot 27 times.
That's a dead guy that's been on my show.
Just texted me. 27 times. Not once, not twice, 27 times.
And blown up by a hand grenade.
Yeah.
And he killed everybody else in the room after he died once. He's like,
his upcoming book, Perfectly Wounded, is going to be great. But he was trying to heal and get better and do his craft, and he had like a bad trip from meditation, not doing drugs or anything, but But I just wondered if there's fighters out there and they haven't considered doing meditation. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I have. I think I would have to be trained by a guy like you, like how to meditate, or someone that does that. I just can't just sit around and shut up.
Well, you know what it is in its simplicity is you are slowing down the mind and you are retraining it to have new and different connections. That's it. Purely it.
When I'm going to go for the names here, and obviously don't have a computer in front of me, but I believe when Mauricio Hua fought Chuck, I have a plan. And his plan was he kind of verbalized the plan, and, that's probably bullshit. But then he got into the ring and got punched in the face a whole bunch. And his plan was to put his hands in front of his face and run towards Chuck's fist as fast as he could. And I'm like, you're a good fighter. Like, what the fuck happens? Like, so, and that's just, again, not to disparage any fighter because it's incredible what they do. But what does happen in that moment? Like, surely you have a plan, and Chuck has a lot of holes in his fighting style. Like, I couldn't beat him, but I can see, like, just he's not what a lot of other fighters are. But there he is punching him in the face and fights over in 45 seconds or something like that. What the fuck happens? I mean, it's a good fighter against a guy who's more one-dimensional.
Yeah. Well, Mike Tyson said everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
So the reason is your brain knows that's really bad for you. Like your brain makes decisions without your. So you may have trained and had all this mindset, but the minute you get smashed, your brain's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And it starts, fight or flight, taking over your responses, your reactions. So but, everyone has weaknesses in their structure, their body, their style, their mechanics, their flow.
Yeah.
And, the very smart people continue to modify their system to exploit those weaknesses, just like in business, just like in warfare, just like in negotiation. And the hard part is most people are tied to one set of thinking, one set of physical development, one style, one thing. And so it's really hard to make those shifts. And when you get whacked and you're like, whoa, I need to make a shift, it's not going to happen then.
Yeah.
It's going to happen in that 1,000 hours of training beforehand that got you ready for that. So you didn't get hit.
Mike was also a guy, too, that would absolutely outwork his opponent, at least in his head and his mind. He got him up out of bed first thing in the morning and go out and do this because the other guy was doing it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to get caught short. Dennis Eckersley's the same way. Like that fear of failure. I'm going to do this because I don't want that outcome. And it allowed them to dominate for a long time.
Yeah. Well, conditioning is still your best finishing home.
Yeah.
Because at some point, everybody's going to get tired.
Yeah.
And if you know how to use your body, use your energy, 25 minutes is a lifetime of fighting. Like
Most people don't realize a 3-minute round of just
a
regular
minute
boxing
is a
it's
lifetime
lot.
of fighting. Like most fights are like 20, 25 seconds. Like that's an
If you
average
get knocked
street
out,
fight.
that might be your life's career.
But to fight like that, I mean, we do this thing where, in fact, we did it with Google, where you punch for a minute straight.
Yeah.
And it's like punching for a minute straight is one of the hardest things that you ever have to do.
Yeah.
And when you're not thinking about it or focused or relaxed or have done it, and it's this new experience, you don't know what it is. And so it just sucks the life out of you. Imagine fighting for 25 minutes.
So in my very brief and very limited and very amateurish fighting career, one of the reasons why I was ever successful is you can be a great fighter if you're just flat out in better shape than the other guy.
Yep.
And when they blow
Always
out in
works.
the first 30 seconds, and you're like, hey, your hands don't go up anymore. I all of a sudden became Sugar Ray Leonard, like pop, 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 hitting, not hurting him at all, but just able to win a fight. It's just because I knew to withstand that barrage. I was smart, I was tough, and I was in great shape. That's the only reason why I was a passable fighter, and it's funny in life when you see those moments, whatever your discipline is, just that, like right now, coronavirus, right? And people are responding, look, it's a legitimate thing, but they're responding in a way that's overreactive to something that if you allow, time and space, like Scott and I, like when we go into like a combat kind of situation, it's not always pitched in the fight. Like sometimes you just walk around and talk to people all day, and then all of a sudden, boom, in this instant you're fighting. And if you're just sprung up the whole time, you can't maintain it for very long.
Yeah.
I think that's for you. You have a lifetime of fighting, tons of wins and experiences, but now you're still in great shape. You're still meditating. You're still working out. What's the focus now? What's the daily routine like? And then let's talk about the new stuff. Let's talk about the production company and some of the other stuff because you were a fighter but it's not who you are. It's part of who you are. But let's shift gears a little bit. Now I want to hear about that, like what you're doing now to stay in shape, which you are. You're gonna live to be a healthy 100. That's our goal.
Going for it.
Got another
I set the
53
clock
years
at 100.
But yeah, let's talk about that. Tell me about that.
Well, I still work out most days, and that's either I just started lifting weights again in the past month. So I've lifted weights for 25 consecutive years, and then I took some time off. So I've just started back up again. I try to break a sweat every day. That's like my thing. And so you see all these hills around here. I hike these hills when I'm not in the gym. I like to, and then I've combined the hiking the hills with doing my conference calls. So if you've ever had a conference call, you can hear me going, "All right, team, here's what we're going to do today." And they're like, "Wow, Frank's really excited about this call." It's because I'm out, doing double duty. But that's kind of my mindset to fitness. You do something every day, you break a sweat. When you're tired, you rest. Eat good food, sleep good. Just generally care for the machine. I think of the body as a machine. So we got 100 years. We got to make 100 years. We got to care for the machine that's going to last 100 years. And then I still meditate every day. I still pray morning and night. I'm still very connected with my spirituality. And then business for me is like, I built this $10 million brand. I was advised early on, you want to be successful, build a multi-million-dollar brand, secure it, leverage it, and then monetize it for the rest of your life. And as long as you don't do something stupid, your brand will have all this value. So I basically monetize my brand. And then I also carry that same strategy and method that I use for my brand, and I do other brands. So I do other celebrities, I do other sports personalities, I do other people in the business.
Sure.
All of that has led to the other areas of my business, which is the speaking and the coaching and the asset management. So when you talk about a film, the last film I made was The Bipolar Rock and Roller, which was about Mauro Ranallo, the sports broadcaster who has bipolar. Mauro Ranallo is my client. He's in my celebrity asset management portfolio. We need to take his brand to the next level. And so we were figuring out a way to take his brand from being a sportscaster. Most sportscasters are not household names. Mm-hmm. Right. Most guys behind the mic are guys behind the mic, and that's all they'll ever be. But we wanted to find a way to take him to the next level, so we created a film about him. In the process of making the film, we realized the importance of educating people and helping people with mental health awareness. So the film became a biodoc about him, but when you watch it, you really go on this very in-depth journey about what mental illness is and how to care for, recognize, and support mental illness. And so, helping out my buddy, made a film, and now I'm a filmmaker for mental health awareness films.
Where just so we know, where do they find the film at? Right?
Oh, you can find that at bipolarmovie.org.
Okay.
Yeah, and we produced it with Showtime. Showtime showed it through their channels on airlines, and then we made it free and available for everybody. Our goal this year is to get 200,000 people to see it. So you'll see a big marketing campaign coming out in the next few weeks, because we've probably got 10,000 emails, and there are emails like, "I never knew what was wrong with my daughter. I never knew what was wrong with my uncle. You saved my life. I'm going to get help today." Because one thing we were very, adamant on is including care modules and information in this film. So you watch this film, it's a great film, but you walk away going, like a good movie, like a good TV show, I can do something and I know what to do. And so it's been super powerful.
And you're not the first person to invent that awareness model, but I think I always love hearing that, man, is not saying, well, it's been done before. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to keep reminding people how important this is. And I think that's really important, not only in the mental health space, but what we do in the connection to how I stay connected to veterans, and you are too. Tell me how you got involved with that too, with John, is why it's important for you to help veterans.
Sure. Well, I got connected with John because one of my daughter's friends, Alexa, her dad, Jeremiah, served with John. And so John always supports, Jeremiah always supports my charity events. And one day he comes over, we're doing a science project, and he's like, "Hey, my buddy John's coming through and he tells me this story. And I'm like, dude, I'd love to do that. Like, I got Saturday off. I don't have a job. And so he's like, well, come out. We'll hike with him. I'd love to support him. So we go out and we support him. I end up walking with him for 5 hours, and he's telling me a story. And I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, what are we?
He's remarkable.
We should make a movie about this. And he's like, well, I am. And so I was like, well, I just made this movie about mental health. But the real tie-in for me is, my stepdad, Joe, was a Marine, served in the Marines, went to Vietnam. My grandfather was in the Air Force. We have a long military history in our family. My brother was a Navy guy and worked as a chef in the Navy. And then after his service, he lost a finger in like a freak accident in the kitchen. And he got discharged. But it was the thing that gave him structure in his life. It was the thing that gave him worth and focus. And after that, he was lost. And he was very artistic and he was very creative, a great musician. And he ended up homeless on the streets. And so for 10 years, we tried to get him off the streets. And it was, we'd launch these charity campaigns, these outreach campaigns. They were all for him because we were trying to get my brother off the streets. And so, after 10 years, he ended up in jail and he took his own life. Oh. And it was 10 years of our family trying everything like this and that.
So not only,
unfortunately it didn't.
Another connection with you and John.
Yeah.
I mean,
But that's the real world. And we as a family did, everything. Like he lived in my house, he slept on my couch, like anything you could imagine, we provided as a resource. But he wasn't ready to, to get help. He wasn't ready to seek that. And, it was really challenging for our family to go through that and then to lose him.
Yeah.
Because we put so much effort into it. So, one of the reasons why we do the Perry Juarez grant through our charity for artistic veterans is, we want to honor him and we want people like him. He was gifted, but he was a little bit bipolar. And that's how we got into bipolar. He could pick up he could pick up the guitar and in 10 minutes we'll be playing it because he just had a gift where he could hear things differently when it came to music.
Yeah.
But he wasn't able to translate that into anything of value. And so our grant is specifically for artistic veterans. Like if you got an art and it's not being recognized, like we want to help you with that because I really feel like, if we could have supported my brother in that way and given that to him, he would have latched onto that because besides the military service, art was the only thing that inspired him.
And that's enough.
That's enough. It changed your life. Like art in and of itself. I consider myself an artist because what I did with my body through martial arts was solely artistic expression.
Yeah, the word art is in the title.
Yeah. Right? All that crazy fighting stuff where I'm doing sleeper moves and all that stuff, to me, that was art. Like
that
I
and
could feel
the athletics of it, too, I think is a common theme, too. We've interviewed so many guys like Josue Barone, my neighbor. He said that's what saved him from the gang life was sports. He said if you give anyone advice, sports or just pulling them outside of that environment is such a recurring theme. Again, you can't share those messages enough. If there's young listeners out there, or they hear you talk, or learn from your experience and failures. There's not a lot of guys that are saying, "Yeah, when I was in prison, what a fuck up I was growing up, and then I got abused." And to have that ability and that capacity, Frank, is to rip open the scab on a podcast or on TV or in front of 1,000 total strangers. Do you ever think that there come a point in time where you can't pick it open as deep?
No, it doesn't bother me. It bothers the audience more than it bothers me.
Yeah.
Because for me, it is what it is. I didn't know there was anything wrong with being locked in a closet. I thought everyone was locked in a closet until I went to juvenile hall. I'm sitting with the bad kids. They're all the gangsters. And I'm like, bro, how do you guys deal with this? And they're like, what are you talking about? So for me, it's always been a learning experience. That was my normal. That was my everyday. So I didn't know.
Jeez.
The other thing about what you're doing, like with the bipolar rock and roller, and I can see the poster over there, is not only normalize that like, people have bipolar disorder and they don't choose. Like I remember when Alonzo Spellman from the Bears was naked and surrounded by cops and losing his mind because he's bipolar. He didn't choose that, and it's easy to say, well, he shouldn't go off his meds, but unless you pick up that rucksack with him and carry it, you realize how fucking hard it is to sort that out. And by the way, the family, like you guys dealing with your brother, it's hard to understand, like, how do you support that person? And then how do you let them go when they're gone, and not put it on you, because it's not your fault. You guys did what you knew how to do in that time. And by the way, people dying is not easy. You're not supposed to be good at it. You know, and that's what films like this do. We had Michael Wellington on the show. He's a bipolar golfer, and he put his family through a lot, but not by choice. You know, by his, and then until no one goes, hey, I think I'm bipolar, you know, and goes to the doctor, like, yeah, you're bipolar, and it's a happy ending. It never goes that way, you know.
And it's a happy ending. Yeah. Well, you look at the statistics, and it takes about 10 years for someone to seek mental health for a serious illness, a mental illness.
I got a couple of years left.
Yeah, no, it takes clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing about my brother is he was at the 10-year mark.
Yeah,
like it was time, right? But you know, instead he couldn't do it. And you know, if you just think about how our society still views this. You know, it's still something that people look away from. It's still something that people, well, he should just do this or he should just do that. He should, you know, tell him to suck it up. And it's like.
And you've probably realized this too with your involvement with John and I'm trying to visualize you hop on the trail with John, you're hiking. Like we did. We just show up, you know, like. By the way, me and John didn't meet until I was at Seal Beach. I'm like, hey, what's up, John? But we're Marines, so, you know, it's like a bromance right from the get-go. But when you show up and you meet John and like he dumps a story on you, this learn is like that connection's there. But what's remarkable about John, and I'll talk about John a little bit because we all know him, is his ability to share his trauma, not only the loss of his brother's suicide, but his own struggles with post-traumatic stress, you know, being a combat vet. But he's doing that while he's an active duty Palo Alto firefighter. I could not be more proud of John because he really is a plank owner in this field. By admitting that and showing that, he is really laying the foundation to allow guys who are first responders or veterans or anyone for that matter to say, hey, look, I've incurred all of this trauma throughout my life or early in life or during my job now. And instead of it being something that's crippling you, that kicks you out of the ring, or they send you to the gear locker in the cop shop, or you're rolling hoses at the fire station. No, that's a resume builder. And I think John's really... just I just couldn't be more proud of him, man. I just wanted to share that with you on the show. And 22andU .org is what John's all about, and he's making a really big difference. And this film, I think, is going to be another brick in that foundation, man. You're helping lay that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's one of the last social barriers. Is this misunderstanding of mental illness. And, you know, a lot of communities and a lot of traditional societies, it's not mental illness. You're gifted. You're unique. You're special. You're a sort, you know, you're a healer. You know. So it's just that in this society, you know, for the past couple hundred years, we've been like, nope, that's you know, that's wrong. That's different. That's odd. Yeah. And, you know, to your point, like the more we normalize this and the more people like John, you know, Morrow, that'll speak out about it and share their message. You know, I'll tell you a story about one of our donors. So we make the movie. It does very well. We get all these emails, and I get emails all the time from people that are bipolar, and they're like 15 pages long, right? Because they say they see this, they've had this life-changing moment, and it's all bold. It's all bold, like it's just, you know, it's bold and it's all caps. It's just, but it's because they're having this moment of realization where they're not alone, and that they could do this. If they did a few mechanics in their life, if they got their community together, if they got their meds together, got their self-care together, because they see Mauro Ranallo, who's at the top of his game, and he's a mess. I mean, the poor guy's like, he needs so much help, and we're just blessed to have, you know, found him and got him in our family where we're like, yeah, we'll help you. Yeah. You know, my brother was like that. Like, that's perfectly normal to us. But, you know, once it's normalized, then these people that, you know, feel like it's a big burden and they're scared to talk about it will feel free to talk about it. And that's what happened with our latest donor is we had a donor who saw the film, and he's a very, very successful man. And he had just gotten out of the psych ward. And he'd spent like 5 days in the psych ward, had a complete meltdown, and he suffers from depressive psychosis. So at some point, when there's not enough self-care and sleep, things start talking to him. And like, oh, there's a whole other world that's happening inside of his head. And he never shared this with anybody. He kept it all to his chest and, you know, put his family through hell. And, you know, for the past 40 years has been suffering silently. And he saw the film, and before he saw the film, he was going to check out and be like, I got enough money and resources to tell everyone to fuck off. And I'm just going to go, you know, hide away. And he saw the film, and he's like, no, I'm not. He's like, I'm going to totally change things. And he ended up, rolling out mental health care programs for 400,000 employees in his companies, and like has made a major impact. One guy.
Just when you think you're not making a difference.
Right. And like he's literally changed the culture of 50 companies in America.
Yeah.
Because he was like, wait a minute. If Mauro can do it, and I see what he's doing, he's just caring for himself. Yeah. He's got a community. He's talking about it. He's not holding this stuff in. He's sharing, like, guys, this is my reality. Sometimes when I don't care for myself, things talk to me. And that's part of what's going on with me. And I was so proud of him. We just did our first annual charity fundraiser and got up on stage and told his story. Guys, to his own community, like, this is what's happening to me. Imagine what we can do if we band together and we use our resources to share this message. And it was just beyond powerful to both his own community, because they all, I'm sure some of them, if you're in a room with 400 people, how many people are suffering? Yeah.
You're really in a room with 800 if they're all talking at the head too. It's
at least.
That's like 800 people. Least. That's a full fucking room.
It was so powerful. Yeah. And that's John's gift is, if you're out, if you're holding all this in every day, imagine how unhealthy your spirit's going to be.
Yeah.
But just to be able to share that and to, find your community and help people and, keep this message going. Because at some point, this is going to be normalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be like, guys, I got locked in the closet. And I'm like, that sucks, bro.
Another guy just doing it for the right reasons too. He's putting his own time and money into it. And what was so cool, I was up there last month up in San Francisco at a Gold Star event, and I said, hey Johnny, I want to come by. He's like, yeah, Scott, I want to put you in the fire engine. I said, well, you won't be the first one. Pete actually took me up in Benicia. I got to slide on the pole, but that was the first time he had shown back up at the fire station after his walk. The guys on the team hadn't seen him, and he still has in flip-flops, and his feet are wrecked, man. Yeah, and he's just hobbling along. But the other firefighters at the station, man, you should have seen the looks on their faces, how proud they were of John, too. Like, when he walked in there, like, I was there for that. And, like, to see the impact he made, just inspiring those other guys who – they weren't all veterans. Some of them were vets, but they didn't understand why he did it. And to see that connection, too, was another thing that, when you do this, everybody always wants to do something really big and you want to help a lot of people, but just to help one person or to inspire, one person can inspire so many others. Yeah. I mean, that's something, again, when I look at a guy like you, and I've heard all about you and John's talked about you, but to have you open your door and invite basically two total strangers who've been vouched for by one guy to see the different layers and reasons you're in it for what you're doing, Frank, is, that's telling to me. And I've seen a lot of shit. Some of the best and some of the worst, and there's a lot of people that do that for the wrong reasons. And they get sniffed out pretty fast. Kind of like the imposters in the rain.
They don't last long.
No, they don't.
But I'll never forget the day that I met Bob Shamrock. I was sitting in juvenile halls, almost 12 years old. And he walked in. I was like, all right, a new dad. I'm going to put the shine on him. And I started to go. And he's like, nope, you can stop right there. And he's like, I'm a real guy. This is how it works at my house. And he just cut right through it. And I was like, you're good. You get good stuff. You're bad. You get bad stuff. Like, we're going to teach you to be men. And he's like, and if you want to come, the door's open. And he turned around and left. And it just had such an impact on me that he was so forthright and so honest and so like, this is how things will be if you come and do this thing. And if not, then that's, good luck on your journey. And it was so powerful to have, a man just stand there and, give me the goods. And then he lived up to that in every single way, always stood by his word and taught me how to be a man, taught me how to be forthright and honest. But the power of one, like he was one man who believed in his mission, which is through sports and athleticism and community, you can change anything. Like you can change your life, you can change someone else's life, you can change your group. And so I try to carry that on. That's why we run the charity in truth, is to keep his legacy alive. And that's how we kind of operate, that's how we operate our charity. So people show up all the time. We get all kinds of people like, well, I want to make a movie. And I'm like, cool, let's make a movie. And in fact, I said this at my speech at our fundraiser, very few people follow through. Yeah. Because it's hard and you have to give of yourself and it's got to be real and you have to have that passion and that earnestness. And like our last guy, like he followed through. He's like, here's what I'm going to do. 400,000 employees. I want you to come speak. I was like, okay, I'm going to say yes.
Sure.
And then you just got to do the work. And, like many people like Bob Shamrock, they become inspired. They have the passion. They do the work. And then things change, like just like that.
People like Bob Shamrock, Billy Graham, who leave a wake of improved people behind them. And then from those come people like you that are like, I'm now going to replicate that. And it's almost like this franchise of good that, continues to happen. Because if you ask young Billy Graham or young Bob Shamrock, like, this is going to be your impact, you think it's possible? No way. Not a chance.
Yeah. Well, I didn't notice the impact that I had in martial arts because I was just doing my thing. I was trying to be the best fighter in the world. I was trying to be a good person. I was trying to be a good teacher. I was trying to be a good dad. So that was solely my focus and to become the best fighter that there was. And so I didn't realize my impact on people. My students would be like, oh, I asked my boss for a raise. Thank you so much for the confidence. And they would tell me these things and I'd be like, good job, because that's what you should have done. Yeah. But it wasn't until I stepped away and I took those 8 years of retirement and I wrote a book and I went out on a book tour. And so, by then, 15 years had passed since I was impacting people. Yeah. And now those, young men were fathers and they had their sons there. And their sons would be telling me the story. No, my dad taught me this because you taught him. And it all just fell into place. And I was like, wow. Incredible. And that was the first time that I realized, how being a good person, doing the right thing, sticking with your passion and helping people, has this rippling effect. And I was like blown away. I came home and I was like, wow. Because I was in my own world, focused on my own thing, doing what Bob taught me. Be a good person. Stick by your word, help people.
Do the work.
Do the work.
I think the circles we swim in, those are probably the three most used words. Oh. Do the work. Mm-hmm. What's the name of the book?
Which book?
Your book.
Oh, Uncaged. My life as an MMA champion. It's around here somewhere.
Find it on Amazon?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon.
Where do people go to find out more about you on social media or websites?
I am at Frank Shamrock everywhere. And FrankShamrock.com is my website.
Okay.
Yeah, but on all social media, I am at Frank Shamrock.
At Frank Shamrock, the legend. Thank you for having us in your home, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What a great day! What a great day we've had so far. So looking forward to having you back on.
Yeah, I look forward to it.